First contact and conscription. The day the sky split open was the day humanity's isolated existence came to an abrupt end. Sarah Chen, a 28-year-old aerospace engineer, stood among the crowd gathered in Times Square, her eyes fixed on the swirling vortex that had materialized above the city. The collective gasp of millions echoed through the concrete canyons of New York as a massive ship, easily the size of Central Park, emerged from the tear in reality. This is not a drill or a hoax. The emergency broadcast system blared from every screen and device. Please remain calm and await further instructions. Sarah snorted. Remain calm. When the plot of every sci-fi movie she'd ever watched was unfolding before her eyes. Fact chance. The ship hung there, a silent monolith against the azure sky, for what felt like an eternity. Then, without warning, a beam of light shot down from its underside, coalescing into a holographic figure standing 20 stories tall above the awestruck crowd. The being was clearly alien, its body a shimmering, opalescent mass that seemed to constantly shift and flow. When it spoke, the words appeared in every language simultaneously, echoing in the minds of all who listened. People of Earth, we come seeking your aid. We are the Galactic Alliance, a confederation of species united in the face of a terrible threat. Our enemy, the Void Swarm, consumes all in its path. We have traveled far to find you, for legends speak of your kind's unique abilities. Join us, and together we may yet survive the coming darkness. The next few weeks were a blur of global panic, heated debates, and frantic preparations. The United Nations convened an emergency session, and after days of intense negotiation, a decision was reached. Humanity would join the alliance, but on its own terms. Sarah found herself caught up in the whirlwind of events. As one of the top minds in her field, she was among the first group of humans selected to join the alliance forces. The day she received her conscription notice, she sat in her apartment, staring at the holographic message floating above her coffee table. "This is insane," she muttered, running a hand through her short, dark hair. "I design satellites, not warships. What the hell do they expect me to do?" A soft chime interrupted her thoughts. It was time. With a deep breath, Sarah grabbed her go-bag and headed for the door. As she stepped outside, she took one last look at the New York skyline, wondering if she'd ever see it again. The spaceport was a hive of activity, a hastily constructed facility on the outskirts of the city. Thousands of humans from all walks of life converged on the massive structure, each carrying with them the hopes and fears of those they left behind. As Sarah made her way through the crowded terminal, she couldn't help but overhear snippets of conversation around her. "I heard their technology is centuries beyond ours," a wide-eyed teenager was saying to his friend. "Yeah, but at what cost?" An older woman replied, her voice tinged with suspicion. "What if this is just some elaborate invasion scheme?" Sarah shook her head, trying to focus on the task at hand. She presented her ID at the checkpoint, where a holographic scanner bathed her in blue light. "Sarah Chen, Aerospace Engineering Division," a disembodied voice announced. "Proceed to Docking Bay 17. As she made her way through the labyrinthine corridors, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking into the unknown. The enormity of what was happening, humanity's first steps into a larger galaxy, weighed heavily on her shoulders. Docking Bay 17 was a cavernous space, dominated by a sleek, silver vessel unlike anything Sarah had ever seen. Its hull seemed to ripple and shift, as if it were made of liquid metal. A ramp extended from its side, where a line of humans was slowly making its way inside. As Sarah approached, she noticed a group of aliens standing nearby, observing the boarding process. One of them, a tall avian creature with iridescent feathers, caught her eye and nodded in acknowledgement. "Greetings, Sarah Chen," it said, its beak moving in sync with the words that formed in Sarah's mind. "I am Commander Zixtal. Welcome to the Star Search." Sarah blinked, momentarily taken aback by the direct telepathic communication. Thank you, Commander," she managed to reply. "I'm honored to be here, but I have to admit, I'm not sure what I can contribute to your war effort." Zixtal's head tilted to one side, a gesture Sarah interpreted as curiosity. "Your species possesses qualities we have long sought: adaptability, creativity, and an indomitable spirit. These are weapons as potent as any battlecruiser in our fight against the Void Swarm." Before Sarah could respond, a low hum filled the air, and the ramp began to retract. "It is time," Zixtal said. "Board now, Sarah Chen. Your journey begins." With a deep breath, Sarah stepped onto the ramp. As she ascended into the alien ship, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was leaving behind more than just her home. She was leaving behind everything she knew, everything that defined her as human. The interior of the Star Surge was a marvel of engineering, with corridors that seemed to shift and reconfigure themselves as they walked. Sarah and her fellow humans were led to a large chamber filled with what appeared to be stasis pods. "These will facilitate your journey to Alliance space," an alien guide explained. "The trip would take years by conventional means, but our Fold space drive will deliver us in a matter of weeks. You will sleep, and when you awake, you will be in a new galaxy." As Sarah climbed into her assigned pod, 1,000 questions raced through her mind. What would this new galaxy be like? What horrors awaited them in the form of the Void Swarm? And most importantly, what role would humanity play in this cosmic war? The pod's cover slid shut with a soft hiss, and Sarah felt a wave of drowsiness wash over her. As her consciousness began to fade, one final thought echoed in her mind. The universe had called, and humanity had answered. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Training and integration. Sarah Chen awoke with a start, her heart pounding as the stasis pod's cover slid open with a soft hiss. For a moment, disorientation gripped her. The last thing she remembered was boarding the alien ship on Earth. Now, as her eyes adjusted to the dim light, she found herself in a vast chamber unlike anything she had ever seen. "Welcome to Nexus Station, humans," a melodious voice echoed through the room. Sarah sat up, her gaze falling upon a being that seemed to be made of living crystal. Its faceted body refracted the light in mesmerizing patterns as it moved. "I am Lazen Prism. You have slept for 3 weeks as we traverse the gulf between galaxies. Your training begins now." As Sarah and her fellow humans stumbled out of their pods, still groggy from stasis, the reality of their situation began to sink in. They were no longer in the Milky Way. They were in a foreign galaxy, about to be thrust into an interstellar war against an enemy they knew nothing about. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. The humans were divided into groups based on their skills and aptitudes. Sarah found herself assigned to the engineering corps, along with a diverse group of humans and aliens. Their first lesson came in the form of cultural integration. Lazen Prism led them through a series of holographic simulations, introducing them to the myriad species that made up the Galactic Alliance. "Understanding is the foundation of unity," Prism explained, its crystalline form shimmering as it spoke. "And unity is our greatest weapon against the Void Swarm." Sarah watched in awe as holographic representations of various alien species appeared before them. There were the Zixtal, avian beings of incredible grace and intelligence; the Morkai, amorphous entities capable of manipulating gravity itself; and dozens of others, each more fantastic than the last. As fascinating as the lesson was, Sarah couldn't help but feel a gnawing sense of inadequacy. How are we supposed to compete with beings that can manipulate gravity or communicate telepathically? She whispered to the human next to her, a burly man named Jake who had been a mechanical engineer back on Earth. Jake shrugged, his expression a mix of awe and determination. "We'll find a way. Humans are good at that, right?" Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion across the room. A Morkai engineer, its gelatinous body rippling with agitation, was engaged in a heated debate with a human scientist. "Your methods are inefficient and primitive," the Morkai gurgled, its words translated by the neural implants they had all received upon arrival. "We have been building starships for millennia. What could you possibly contribute?" The human scientist, a woman named Dr. Yara Okafor, stood her ground. "Just because something's old doesn't mean it's the best way. Sometimes a fresh perspective is exactly what you need to innovate." Sarah watched the exchange with interest. It was clear that integrating humans into the alliance wasn't going to be without its challenges. As the days turned into weeks, the training intensified. Sarah found herself pushed to the limits of her knowledge and abilities. The alien technology was leagues beyond anything she had worked with on Earth, but she was determined to master it. One particularly grueling day, as Sarah struggled to understand the principles behind the Alliance's fold space drive, she had a breakthrough. The equations that had been giving her headaches suddenly clicked into place, and she realized something that none of her alien instructors had considered. What if we modulated the drive's energy output based on the local gravitational field? She mused aloud, scribbling furiously on her datapad. We could increase efficiency by at least 15%. Her alien mentor, a Zixtal engineer named Krellifor, peered over her shoulder with his sharp avian eyes. "Interesting," he chirped, his feathers ruffling with excitement. "This approach, it's unorthodox, but the math checks out. How did you come up with this?" Sarah shrugged, a small smile playing on her lips. "Just thinking outside the box, I guess. It's kind of a human specialty." Word of Sarah's innovation spread quickly through the station. Suddenly, the human contingent wasn't just being tolerated. They were being sought out for their unique perspectives and problem-solving abilities. But not everyone was thrilled with the humans' rising status. As Sarah and her team were leaving the mess hall one evening, they found themselves confronted by a group of Morkai engineers. "You think you can just show up and start changing things?" The lead Morkai bubbled angrily. "You don't belong here. You're not ready for this war." Sarah felt her temper flare, but before she could respond, Jake stepped forward. "Maybe we're not ready," he said calmly, "but we're here, and we're going to do everything we can to help. Isn't that what matters?" The tension in the air was palpable. For a moment, Sarah thought the confrontation might turn violent. But then, unexpectedly, one of the other Morkai spoke up. "He's right," it said, its gelatinous form rippling with what Sarah had learned to recognize as embarrassment. "We're all in this together. The Void Swarm doesn't care about our species or our differences. We need to stand united." The lead Morkai hesitated, then seemed to deflate slightly. Perhaps we have been too hasty in our judgment," it admitted reluctantly. "Your methods may be unconventional, but they have shown promise." As the Morkai group dispersed, Sarah let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "Nice job, Jake," she said, clapping him on the shoulder. "Looks like diplomacy is another human specialty." Jake grinned. "Hey, I was a union rep back on Earth. Dealing with angry aliens isn't that different from dealing with angry machinists." Their moment of levity was interrupted by a station-wide alert. Commander Zixtal's voice echoed through the corridors, urgent and commanding. "All personnel, report to your assigned stations immediately. This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill. The Void Swarm has been detected on the edge of our system. We are now at war." Sarah exchanged a look of shock and determination with her teammates. This was it, the moment they had been training for. As they raced to their posts, Sarah's mind was already racing, analyzing potential strategies and innovations that might give them an edge. The Void Swarm was coming, and humanity was about to face its greatest test. But as Sarah took her place at the engineering console, she felt a surge of confidence. They might be newcomers to this galactic stage, but humans had a long history of beating the odds. It was time to show the universe what humanity was truly capable of. The Battle of Nexus Prime. The command center of Nexus Station was a hive of frantic activity. Holographic displays filled the air, showing the approaching Void Swarm fleet, a writhing mass of biomechanical horrors that defied description. Sarah Chen stood at her engineering station, her fingers flying over the controls as she ran system diagnostics and power optimizations. Commander Zixtel's voice cut through the chaos, steady and authoritative. The Void Swarm has breached our outer defenses. All hands, prepare for combat. This is not just a battle for Nexus Prime. It's a stand for the entire sector. Sarah exchanged a tense glance with Jake, who was manning the adjacent weapons control station. This was it, their first real combat situation since joining the Alliance. All their training, all their preparations were about to be put to the ultimate test. First wave incoming, a Morkai tactical officer announced, its gelatinous form quivering with tension. The void of space outside the station lit up with weapons fire. Alliance ships, a hodgepodge fleet of vessels from a dozen different species, engaged the enemy. The Void Swarm ships were unlike anything Sarah had ever seen, even in simulations. They seemed to be part organic, part machine, moving with an unsettling fluidity that defied the laws of physics as she understood them. "They're ships," Sarah muttered, her eyes fixed on the tactical display. "They're adapting, changing their configuration mid-battle." Jake nodded grimly. "Yeah, and our weapons aren't doing much damage. It's like they're evolving resistances in real time." An idea struck Sarah like a bolt of lightning. "That's it," she exclaimed, her fingers already tapping out new commands on her console. "If they can adapt, so can we. Jake, I need you to modulate our weapon frequencies. Randomize them, but follow this pattern." She quickly sent over a series of calculations. Jake's eyes widened as he saw what she was proposing. "This is insane," he said, a grin spreading across his face. "It might just work." As Jake implemented the changes, Sarah turned to the propulsion systems. "Commander," she called out to Zixtel, "I need authorization to reconfigure our engine output. We can use the fold space drive to create localized distortions. It'll mess with their ability to predict our movements." Zixtel fixed her with a piercing gaze, then nodded sharply. "Do it, Engineer Chen. At this point, we need every advantage we can get." Sarah's modifications rippled through the Alliance fleet. Ships began to move in erratic patterns, their weapons firing in unpredictable bursts. The Void Swarm, caught off guard by the sudden change in tactics, began to falter. "It's working," Jake shouted over the din of battle alerts. "Their adaptation rate is slowing down. We're actually hurting them now." But the tide of battle was far from turned. Even as the Alliance forces pressed their advantage, more Void Swarm ships poured into the system. The station shuddered as enemy fire found its mark, breaching shields and tearing into the outer hull. "Hull breach in sectors 7 through 9, a Zixtel officer reported. We're losing power to the eastern quadrant." Sarah's mind raced. They needed something more, something the Void Swarm couldn't possibly anticipate. Her eyes fell on the station's massive fold space drive, and a dangerous idea began to form. "Commander," she said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins, "I have a plan. But it's risky. We might not survive it." Zixtel turned to her, his avian features set in grim determination. "At this point, Engineer Chen, survival is not guaranteed either way. What do you propose?" Sarah took a deep breath. "We overload the fold space drive. Not to jump, but to create a massive spatial distortion. It'll act like a black hole, but one we can control. We can use it to trap the Void Swarm ships, maybe even tear them apart." The command center fell silent for a moment, all eyes on Sarah and the commander. The energy required. It would burn out our systems, one of the alien engineers protested. "We'd be defenseless." "But alive," Jake countered. "And so would everyone else in this sector." Zixtel's feathers ruffled as he considered the proposal. Finally, he nodded. "Do it. But I want evacuation protocols initiated for non-essential personnel. If this fails, we need to save as many as we can." Sarah's hands flew over her console, reprogramming the fold space drive for a task it was never designed to do. Jake worked beside her, rerouting power and preparing the station's systems for the enormous strain they were about to endure. Void swarm closing in, the tactical officer announced. They'll be within fatal range in 2 minutes. Just need 1 more minute, Sarah muttered, sweat beading on her forehead as she raced against time. The station rocked with explosions as the enemy pressed their attack. Warning klaxons blared, announcing multiple hull breaches and system failures. 30 seconds. Sarah's fingers danced across the controls, making final adjustments. Ready on your mark, Commander. Zixtal's eyes were fixed on the tactical display, watching as the Void swarm ships closed in for the kill. Wait for it. Wait. Now. Initiate. Sarah slammed her hand down on the activation control. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, with a sound that seemed to tear at the fabric of reality itself, a massive distortion appeared in space before the station. The effect was immediate and catastrophic for the Void swarm. Their ships, caught in the gravitational maelstrom, began to twist and break apart. Those on the fringes desperately tried to escape, but the pull was too strong. Inside the station, chaos reigned. Systems overloaded, conduits burst, and entire sections went dark. Sarah and Jake worked feverishly to keep the Fold space drive from tearing itself apart, rerouting power and venting plasma to maintain the distortion. It's working. Someone shouted over the din. The swarm is retreating. Indeed, the few Void swarm ships that had managed to avoid the spatial trap were fleeing, jumping to Fold space with a desperation that seemed almost palpable. As the last enemy ship disappeared from their sensors, Sarah finally allowed herself to breathe. She looked around the smoke-filled command center, taking in the damage and the exhausted but triumphant faces of her comrades. Commander Zixtal approached her, his feathers singed but his eyes bright with victory. "Engineer Chen," he said, his mental voice filled with a respect that bordered on awe. "I believe you have just turned the tide of this war." Sarah managed a tired smile. "Just thinking outside the box, sir. It's what we humans do best." As the adrenaline of battle faded, replaced by the monumental task of repairing their battered station, Sarah couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. Humanity had been thrust into this war, outsiders in a conflict they barely understood. But today, they had proven their worth. They had shown the galaxy that sometimes it took a human perspective to solve an alien problem. The battle was won, but Sarah knew the war was far from over. As she looked out at the star-filled expanse beyond the station, she wondered what other challenges awaited them, and what other innovations humanity might bring to this cosmic conflict. One thing was certain: the Galactic Alliance would never underestimate the value of a human again. Uncovering the truth. In the weeks following the Battle of Nexus Prime, Sarah Chen found herself hailed as a hero across the Galactic Alliance. The innovative tactics she had developed had not only saved the station, but had also provided new hope in the war against the Void swarm. However, as the initial euphoria of victory faded, Sarah found herself grappling with a growing sense of unease. One quiet cycle, as she was elbow-deep in the guts of a damaged Fold space drive, Sarah's thoughts were interrupted by Jake's arrival. "Hey, superstar," he greeted her with a grin. "Still can't keep away from the engine room, huh?" Sarah emerged from the access panel, wiping grease from her hands. "Just because we won one battle doesn't mean we can rest on our laurels. The Void swarm will be back, and we need to be ready." Jake's expression grew serious. "About that, have you noticed anything odd lately?" Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Odd how?" "Well, for one thing, the data from the battle. I've been going over it, and some things just don't add up. The swarm's retreat, it was too orderly, too coordinated for a species we've been told operates on pure instinct." Sarah frowned. Now that Jake mentioned it, she had noticed some discrepancies in her own analysis. "You're right. And have you seen how tight-lipped the High Command has been about our next moves? It's like they're afraid of their own shadow." Their conversation was cut short by an alert on Sarah's comm device. "Engineer Chen, Report to command immediately, came the terse message from Commander Zixtal. As Sarah made her way to the command center, her mind raced with possibilities. Had they detected another swarm incursion? Was there a problem with her modifications to the station's defenses? The scene that greeted her in the command center was tense. Zixtal stood at the center, his feathers ruffled in agitation. Around him, officers from various species huddled in hushed conversation. "Ah, Engineer Chen," Zixtal said as she entered. "We have a situation. Our long-range scouts have detected an anomaly at the edge of Alliance space. We believe it may be related to the Void Swarm, but its nature is unclear." Sarah studied the holographic display. The anomaly appeared as a swirling vortex of energy, unlike anything she had seen before. "What do we know about it?" she asked. "Very little," Zixtal admitted, "which is why we need your expertise. We're assembling a team to investigate, and given your recent innovations, we want you to lead the engineering contingent." Sarah's eyes widened. "Me? But surely there are more experienced." Zixtal cut her off with a wave of his wing. "Your unconventional thinking is exactly what we need. The team leaves in 6 hours. Prepare yourself, Engineer Chen. I have a feeling this mission will be unlike any other." As Sarah left to prepare, her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. This was a huge responsibility, but also an opportunity to uncover more about their enigmatic enemy. 6 hours later, Sarah found herself aboard the scout ship Stellar Whisper, a sleek vessel designed for stealth and speed. As they approached the anomaly, the ship's sensors began to go haywire. "These readings don't make any sense," Sarah muttered, poring over the data. "It's like the laws of physics are breaking down around that thing." Suddenly, a jolt ran through the ship. Alarms blared as they were pulled into the swirling vortex of energy. For a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, reality itself seemed to twist and warp around them. When the chaos subsided, Sarah looked out the view screen and gasped. They were in an entirely different region of space, and before them floated a massive structure, a space station that dwarfed even Nexus Prime. By the cosmic core, the Morkai navigator bubbled in awe. "What is this place?" As they cautiously approached the station, Sarah's console lit up with an incoming transmission. To everyone's shock, the face that appeared on the screen was unmistakably human. "Greetings, travelers," the man said, his expression a mix of surprise and wariness. "I am Dr. Elias Vance, Chief Scientist of Project Threshold. I must say, we weren't expecting visitors, especially not from our own past." A stunned silence fell over the bridge. Sarah was the first to find her voice. "Our own past? What do you mean? Who are you people?" Dr. Vance sighed heavily. "It's a long story, one that spans centuries from your perspective. But to put it simply, we are humanity's future and the architects of what you know as the Void Swarm." The revelation hit Sarah like a physical blow. The Void Swarm, the terrifying enemy that had united the galaxy against it, was human in origin. But how? Why? She stammered. "Come aboard," Dr. Vance said grimly. "There's much we need to discuss. The fate of not just humanity, but the entire galaxy hangs in the balance. And you, Sarah Chen, may be the key to setting things right." As the Stellar Whisper docked with the mysterious station, Sarah's mind reeled with questions. What had led humanity down this dark path? How had they become the very threat that they were fighting against? And most importantly, what role was she destined to play in this cosmic drama? One thing was certain. The truth behind the Void Swarm was far more complex and terrifying than anyone in the Galactic Alliance could have imagined. As Sarah prepared to step onto the station, she steeled herself for whatever revelations awaited. The real war, she realized, might just be beginning. The final stand. Sarah Chen stepped onto the massive station, her mind still reeling from the revelation that the Void Swarm, the threat that had united the galaxy, was of human origin. Dr. Elias Vance led her and the small team from the Stellar Whisper through pristine corridors that hummed with advanced technology far beyond even what the Galactic Alliance possessed. "Welcome to Terminus Station," Dr. Vance said, his voice echoing in the cavernous central chamber they entered. "The nexus of Project Threshold and humanities. Well, I suppose you'd call it our fall from grace." The chamber was dominated by a massive holographic display of the galaxy, swirling with data points and trajectories that Sarah could barely comprehend. "I don't understand," Sarah said, her voice tight with confusion and growing anger. "How could humanity become this? The Void Swarm has destroyed entire civilizations." Dr. Vance's face was a mask of regret. "It began with the noblest of intentions. After joining the Galactic Alliance in your time, humanity pushed the boundaries of science and exploration. We discovered threats lurking in the dark between galaxies, horrors that made the Void Swarm look benign in comparison." He manipulated the holographic display, showing images that made Sarah's blood run cold. Cosmic entities of impossible geometry, devouring entire star systems. "We created the Void Swarm as a defense," Vance continued, "a self-replicating, adaptive force that could stand against these cosmic horrors. But we underestimated the power of our creation. It evolved beyond our control, seeing all life as a potential threat to be assimilated or destroyed." Sarah's mind raced, connecting the dots. "The battle at Nexus Prime. You were testing us, weren't you? Gauging our capabilities." Vance nodded grimly. "We've been searching for a solution, a way to shut down the swarm without leaving the galaxy defenseless. Your tactics, your innovations, they've given us hope that there might be a way." Before Sarah could respond, alarms blared throughout the station. An Morkai scientist rushed into the chamber, its gelatinous form rippling with agitation. "The swarm," it burbled urgently. "They've followed us through the anomaly. They're attacking in full force." Vance's face paled. "No, it's too soon. We're not ready." Sarah stepped forward, her shock giving way to determination. "Maybe you're not, but we are. The Galactic Alliance has been fighting the swarm for years. Let us help." For a moment, Vance hesitated. Then he nodded sharply. "Very well. What do you propose?" Sarah turned to the holographic display, her mind already formulating a plan. "We need to combine our technologies, your advanced systems with our adaptive tactics, if we can create a feedback loop in the swarm's network." As Sarah outlined her plan, a spark of hope ignited in Vance's eyes. The next hours were a blur of frantic preparation. Sarah worked alongside scientists from both the future and her own time, integrating technologies and strategies in ways never before attempted. Outside the station, the battle raged. The Void Swarm attacked with a ferocity born of desperation, as if sensing that its very existence was at stake. Alliance ships fought alongside advanced vessels from Vance's time, barely holding the line. In the heart of Terminus Station, Sarah stood before a jury-rigged console that interfaced with both the station's systems and the Stellar Whisper. This was the linchpin of their plan, a daring attempt to broadcast a shutdown signal directly into the core of the swarm's hive mind. "It all comes down to this," Sarah muttered, her fingers poised over the activation sequence. Vance placed a hand on her shoulder. "The fate of not just our timeline, but all potential futures, rests on this moment. Are you ready, Sarah Chen?" Sarah took a deep breath, thinking of Earth, of the friends she'd made in the Alliance, of all the lives hanging in the balance. "Ready as I'll ever be. Let's rewrite history." She activated the sequence. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, like a wave of silence sweeping across the battlefield, the Void Swarm ships began to go dark. "It's working." Jake's voice crackled over the comms from the Stellar Whisper. "The swarm is shutting down." A cheer went up throughout the station, but Sarah knew their job wasn't finished. "Quick," she said to Vance, "while the swarm is dormant. You said you created it to defend against greater threats. Show me." Vance nodded gravely and adjusted the holographic display. Together, they began to work on a new protocol, one that would repurpose the swarm from a mindless destroyer into a true defender of the galaxy. Hours turned into days as they worked, fine-tuning the new programming, setting limits and fail-safes that would prevent the swarm from ever again turning against those it was meant to protect. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity of coding and testing, it was done. Sarah stood back, exhausted but triumphant, as the newly reprogrammed swarm came back online. In the space around Terminus Station, the swarm's ships reformed, but this time they took up defensive positions. Sensors showed them already moving to the fringes of the galaxy, standing guard against the cosmic horrors that lurked beyond. "You did it," Vance said, awe in his voice. "You've saved us all." Sarah shook her head. "We did it. Humanity's past and future working together. That's the real power we bring to the galaxy. The ability to learn, to adapt, to find solutions where none seemed possible." As the reality of their victory sank in, Sarah knew that the adventure was far from over. There would be explanations to give to the Alliance, bridges to build between past and future. The galaxy was entering a new era, one where humanity's potential could truly shine. "So," she said, turning to her team with a grin, "who's ready to make some history?" As they prepared to return to their own time, carrying the knowledge that would reshape the future, Sarah felt a profound sense of purpose. Humanity had faced its greatest challenge and emerged stronger for it. They had proven, beyond any doubt, the true worth of a human in the cosmic tapestry. The stars beckoned, and this time, humanity would answer not as conquerors or destroyers, but as guardians and innovators. The human factor, Sarah realized, was not just about survival or dominance. It was about growth, cooperation, and the endless capacity to rise above their own limitations. As the stellar whisper prepared to re-enter the temporal anomaly, Sarah took one last look at the vast expanse of space before her. Whatever challenges awaited them in the future, she knew now that humanity was ready to face them. The greatest adventure was just beginning.